Hi, this is Steve Hoskinson, and welcome to the End of Trauma podcast. Today I want to talk to you about this end of trauma process and what it might mean in relationship to hope and hopefulness. I was this week writing on a web page that I'll be using to launch our end of trauma course, and I found myself doing something unusual, which was giving something like advice, but I think the technical term would be exhortation. And the exhortation was, don't give up. Don't give up. And I think about that because I don't usually, one, tell people what to do, and two, it's not a common thing for me to think about giving up, and so I have, though, been really struck by the need to get the word out about organic intelligence and this work with the human neurobiology. As I trained as a therapist, I really worked my very best to figure out how can I be most helpful and use the best tools that I could find at the time, and looked at what I thought were the core issues of humanity and the core issues of people's struggles. And I began in the more analytic and Freudian psychodynamic processes and approaches and used that in counseling and still think in that way in many ways. Because there's such validity in that, in the way that our early environment, our early family environment, our early intrauterine environment, in the womb and birth and pre and perinatal states around the time of birth, these are all uniquely important because the infant's system is so sensitive and imprinting happens there, which is where our early bonding situation creates a predisposition for relating and styles of relating. It's called attachment theory, of course. And then looked at more complex examples of how we get together and began to work with children and families, and beginning to see that children are parts of families and that these families form systems, and really delved deeply into the work with families, work with children, play therapy with children, and understanding more and more about a system. That is, you can't really treat a child apart from understanding the environment and the relationships and the home and the family and the community around that child. And sometimes, in fact, it is much better to work with a parent or to work with a caregiver, to work with a brother or sister. There are resources in those systems that may be more significant for the child than the counseling you give for the child. And so I began to really understand the nature of systems and the way that these multiple embedded systems, like our primary relationships and families and communities and societies, the culture, all play a part in how we are doing, and all give a frame of reference, a context for understanding how we're doing in the world. But then I began to branch out because I began to see there is a larger effect that's happening. And I studied this mind-body interaction and really began to understand more directly what it means to have both a conscious understanding and an unconscious existence. And that study took me into the understanding of the nature of the unconscious, particularly then from not the emotional or mental or psychological standpoint, but rather from the biological standpoint. So much of what happens for us as human beings, and for others, but for human beings, is really happening beneath the level of consciousness. Our consciousness, our conscious awareness is but a small fraction of what's happening inside. And really, there's even a formulation that therapists, we speak about when we say, we quote Freud, we're saying, Freud would say, where the unconscious is, let consciousness reside. That is, how raises this question, how can I somehow access these deeper, non-conscious aspects of my being, of my feeling, of my moving, of my thinking? And what is that that's really in there? And what I came to see over time is that there is this intelligence, there is this deeper intelligence. And from the standpoint of a system, all of our systems are contributing to our unconscious makeup of being. And I began to wonder, how can I best begin to relate to people that is whole enough to include both conscious and unconscious? Well, at the time, then, in the early days of considering psychology and psychodynamic theory, the unconscious, from the Freudian perspective, was filled with the things that were unacceptable to consciousness. So the things that were just too intense, too unacceptable, too much in opposition to my conscious beliefs, something like that. But I began to see that there was also another side, and I began to study the work of those who began to see that there are unconscious resources. That is, there is an unconscious process of problem solving. For instance, in dreams, problems are often solved. The person, the chemist who discovered the form of the benzene molecule, dreamed of a snake, a Ouroboros, a snake sort of biting its own tail. And that ring revealed to this chemist this ring structure of the benzene form. And maybe you know too these really funny, very interesting experiences where maybe you set your alarm for 7 a.m. and you wake up at 6:59 and a half, just before that alarm goes off. What's happening there? How is it that our system is processing at this other level? Well, organic intelligence is beginning to consider this, and we're beginning in the field of psychology as a whole to move more and more toward understanding that real change has to occur at a fundamental physiological level, and often at a level that is less than fully conscious. We understand that our thinking is important and the way we're thinking is important, but more and more too, people who are trying to feel better are finding that talk has its limits, or that cognition or thinking just doesn't do it. So people are asking, how can I get out of my head? Or how can I get into my body? Or how can I feel this unity between the body and the mind? And that's in particular where organic intelligence excels, because our discomfort really and trauma is fundamentally not an issue of mind or psychology or thinking or cognition or even of emotion or even of sensation or image or any of those. It's fundamentally a disorder in the fundamental makeup of how we are organisms to begin with. Our organisms are organisms because of biological synchrony, right? Our systems, we're not nocturnal, so our systems wake up during the day and we go to sleep at night, unless you're a jazz musician, and then, who cares? But we are actually synced within these cycles of the rising and falling of the sun, these so-called circadian cycles or the biorhythms. And those rhythms then affect all of our cells. So the approach of organic intelligence is to begin to see how this biology is very subtly and mostly at first non-consciously to the client, finding its movement toward greater synchrony, greater harmony in patterns of ups and downs and increasing and decreasing, and in the breathing in and breathing out, how the heart rate is related to the respiration, and so on. There are multiple channels in which the system is trying to bring itself back into order. And that ordering and the reharmonizing, the resyncing, then means that we are feeling better by resyncing our psychology, but also that we are physically being better, right? That mostly we are seeing really tremendous changes in the ways that people feel, but also in the way that their biology is functioning more efficiently. So we are training our practitioners to work well by seeing systems like chronic fatigue improving, or fibromyalgia, the migraine syndromes, and others. They're getting better using less medication and so on by being able to cooperate and learn to ride the waves of the simple movements of biological functioning. So it may be as simple as priming the attention to go toward what's in the outside environment. The reason organic intelligence is so uniquely important and so uniquely sort of offers these unique tools is that the tools we are using are the tools and the ways that your biology wants to do things anyway. So one of the first things we speak about is orientation. And orientation as connecting to the external environment through the senses. And that is riding on the wave of our natural impulse of the brain to map the organism in its environment. So wherever you are right now, your system is mapping and has mapped that environment. And the better that mapping happens and the clearer my connection to that experience, then the safer I feel and the more presenced I feel. The more present I feel, the more in the here and now I feel. So these tools are mindfulness tools, and they are really learnable. And in our courses, we provide reflections, and I'll walk you through exercises of being able to practice these tools that your body wants to learn. In biology, it's called prepared learning. We don't have to really coach young, 11 months old children how to walk. Right? We don't have to show them a YouTube video on DIY walking. Here's how it's supposed to happen, right? This wants to happen. Or if you've hung out with babies at all, they want to come upright, and they'll strain their heads and they'll try to get upright. There is this impulse, this is what needs to happen. I need to be able to get upright. I need to be vertical. I'm a biped. I'll walk on these two legs, and the system's going to figure this out like instinct. And so organic intelligence offers the support of aligning with nature and aligning with instinct and aligning with the impulses that are uniquely organizing. And these will not be the tools that are often coached in various styles of coaching for therapy, because we are seeing that there are distinct phases of work. And these phases are related to the understanding from physics and complexity science of major phases of how systems shift from one quality to another. And there are three of them, and I call them chaos, resilience, and prosilience. And I am working with basically a person who is in one of those three conditions. And that's a biological description. That's not a psychological description. That's a biological description. And so how is a person to begin to relate to their condition? It has to have the coaching that is related to their phase. Is it phase 1, chaos? Is it phase 2, resilience? Is it phase 3, prosilience, moving toward greater and greater forms of evolution and biological efficiency and wisdom. So each of these phases is important because what we do with ourselves and how we begin to support our own biological efficiency and our own biological sense of flow and creativity, we have to have the right support. The right support that is really coming from my own study for many years in somatic psychology, in being able to track the cognitive process, the physical process, the emotional process, the work with imagery. I give a map. And this map I use an acronym for. The acronym really says that our system relies on our somatic process. That is, we are first and foremost a biological being. So the acronym is this: ISOMA, ISOMA. And that acronym, the I stands for image, the S stands for sensation, the O stands for orientation, the M stands for meaning, and the A stands for affect. And these are the channels of our experience. And by being able to understand and be really clear on how my moment-to-moment state is reflected in each of these channels is a real key to, one, wellness, being present in the here and now, and also my own evolution. This course that I was talking about, the End of Trauma course, it's coming. If you want to find out about it, you can go to getoi.org. You can check out our YouTube page as well. There are a lot of free videos there. But this End of Trauma class is going to give you an overview of organic intelligence and how you can begin to use the tools that are going to get you places that you didn't think were possible. And there's hope, right? So many people have encountered trauma, have encountered the headwinds of civilization and culture, have encountered bias of one kind or another, and have really experienced the hopelessness of systems ever changing. And if you look at our political system, you see a ready example of that. But there is hope. And the hope is that our system wants to grow and our system wants to evolve. And in the end, our system wants to live in hopefulness. Not the hopefulness that a certain candidate will be elected, or the hope in some miracle of political stability, but the hope that is born of our human nature. Claude Lévi-Strauss is an anthropologist, and he said of our prehistoric ancestors, as he looked at the history of our people over a long time, he said, our ancient prehistoric ancestors were more interested in games of chance than chance of game. More interested in games of chance than chance of game. In other words, of play. And the excitement of joining together in a common endeavor. So hopefulness then arises from within our being human and our being alive to relationship and in the moment. And these ISOMA channels, image, sensation, orientation, meaning, and affect, are ways that we can begin to overcome the biases of our conditioning that began back in our early family of origin, back in the womb, back in the days of stress, and provide a counterpoint to the way that our system has fallen into suffering. And it might be the suffering of pain, it might be the suffering of loneliness, it might be the suffering of being unable to get the things done that I need to get done, it may be the suffering of sadness or loss and grief, the sadness of seeing societal disintegration, the suffering of humanity. And to transcend that, not by ignoring those problems, but by being able to live within the natural buoyancy of well-being. That buoyancy of well-being is possible, then, by paying attention to the I-soma channels, image, sensation, orientation, meaning, and affect, that at any given moment have the information and the states that are going to help me catalyze my own well-being. But there's a problem, right? I've spoken about the negativity bias, or in organic intelligence, we call the what's wrong attention. For many different reasons, our systems become fascinated with what's wrong. They tend toward the addiction to intensity, so that even if I'm successful, success is defined as Wordsworth would say, in getting and spending we lay waste our powers. In other words, success has become defined in ways that are foreign to our nature, rather than supporting our nature as people who care for people, people who care for life, life caring for life. And so, if your own system, if you feel like you've fallen short of finding your dream, of finding a way to really enact, incorporate, and embody your reason for being on this planet, then I'd like to invite you to join me. The course is called the End of Trauma Course. It's an 8-week course that I have made especially by refining the tools of organic intelligence that I've taught to therapists in Asia and Europe and the North American continent, and to be able to use these tools that are especially attuned to how the biology wants to function, how your body wants to function, and to be able to bring the mind and the body back together and to begin to get all of the things of the system lined up, the images, the sensations, the experience of the world around, thoughts and emotion, all of those horses, if you will, pulling in the same direction. If all of those horses are pulling in different directions, we feel pulled apart, we're not able to get to where we want to go. But that's not how your system wants to work. And so in this End of Trauma course, I'm going to take the tools that have provided the result of peace, of access to joy, of connection and relationship, of meaningful work, of support of life on the planet, and I'm going to make them available to you. So this course, we're going to give you daily efforts on listening to these strategic use of perception practices. So I am tailoring all of our exercises to be uniquely suited to what the biology wants to do, what your system wants. And it's about ease. If you take a look at the website, I'm creating this website right now to be able to, so you can register for the class if you want to. And on that, I'll talk about the ways that your system wants to operate and how we can collaborate with that process. And so there are videos where you can learn about that. And all of these videos also, there are informational videos in addition to the perception practices. And the informational videos are really important because these ideas are so much against the grain of the dominant culture that says, oh, you're here to be productive. But in fact, you're here to be. We are human beings, not human doings. And so the wise use of understanding of when doing is appropriate and when it's not is really key. And it's quite a challenge because much of what disturbs and disrupts the organization of my system has to do with remnants of trauma and remnants of helplessness and remnants of hopelessness, the physiology of immobility, of freeze, what Stephen Porges in his polyvagal theory calls the dorsal vagal system. This is the freeze system, what freezing does, right? This is the legacy of hopelessness and helplessness. But we have this possibility of coming around that, we step around that freezy business and be able to find ways to access the resources of good understanding. So I'm going to send you informational videos. Many of them are taken from our from our human empowerment and resiliency trainings, and I'm talking to you directly about ideas that I think are going to be revolutionary for understanding how change happens. And they're daily because culture is really sort of trying to tell us that we're to conform, we're trying to support the status quo and so on. But maybe that's not your art. Maybe the art of living your life is going to look very different. So it's going to take some repetition to really begin to get this idea of organic intelligence because it's so much sort of swimming upstream of the dominant culture. And it's so new, it's taking a while for people to really incorporate it. But people who are feeling better, and they're becoming successful in their practices. They are going out and teaching about this. And there is a groundswell of understanding and movement. And others also who are teaching in similar directions, as if there is a common stream, as if there is an arising of this intelligence from several different sources. These would be partners of ours in the compassion enterprise of caring, compassion, and empathy. We'll have a journal for you in this End of Trauma course, and the journal is necessary because I'm going to ask specific questions. Right? There's going to be all of these different I-soma channels: image, sensation, orientation, meaning, and affect. And one of the ways that we integrate information and begin to orient ourselves into frameworks and states that feel better is by reflection and by having the mind work in a certain direction. And I'm going to ask questions and offer exercises that will help you spend more time perceiving reality as it is and seeing things that maybe you haven't seen before, but say, oh, of course. So these exercises that I'll present are very brief. The amount of time that you'll need to spend to change your life and to change your perspective forever is really quite small. And I make it really easy because ease is our watchword. On this website that'll be informational for the End of Trauma course, I talk about the brain's default mode. What's really important are pathways to integration and a whole biology that is aiming to integrate or to help systems feed back well into each other. Our system is a system because all of the parts are speaking together and they're telling each other information that they need for homeostasis, for growth, for everything that happens. It's all a system of communication back and forth. And so if that communication back and forth is happening in a synchronous manner, we are well. And that takes some time of reflection, and that takes time of not working. Right? Most of psychology is telling you what to do. Like, here's what you need to do. You need to meditate, you need to do your mantra, you need to do yoga, you need to do relaxation, right? You need to get your sleep hygiene, you need to think about your nutrition, you need to do all these things. And it's true. There are many good things to be able to do, and we'll talk about those. And it is equally important to know when not to do. So in this video on the website for the End of Trauma course, I'll talk a little bit about this, about the brain's default mode, which is when the brain is not working so hard, maybe just daydreaming. How long has it been since you've let yourself just daydream or lie on your back in the grass and look up at the clouds a little bit? Now, it's not just that simple, but the brain's default mode and understanding how to allow that integrative state to occur and when that needs to happen, it's all got to be in a certain rhythm that I'm going to coach you on. Because in the End of Trauma course, you get me as your coach, as your guide in incorporating, embodying, understanding, and feeling into the wisdom of organic intelligence. And your wisdom, contacting, connecting with your inner and innate wisdom. And to be able to tell what's the difference between just more, what would we say, more misdirection from culture that is just trying to keep you busy so that you don't change, actually. And what is the information that if you take in, you begin to dance your own dance, and you can join in a fellowship and a community of people whose aim is the joyful engagement of compassion on the planet. So people become more successful if they really incorporate organic intelligence. I can't tell you how many careers I've launched of therapists. It's hundreds for sure. People who are working in agencies and then develop a private practice and make a bunch of money. People who are developing programs, for nervous systems and so on. But what's really important is our collective effort, our collaboration, our community. And so I'm interested in reaching out to you if caring matters. If you feel like you're here on this planet to do some good, then I'm inviting you to join us in this work of the End of Trauma course. I'll be your coach in weekly webinars, and I'll talk about major themes, and we'll use the ISOMA framework to begin to get a hold of our own experience and remodel our system room by room. Image, sensation, orientation, meaning, and affect. In each of these rooms, there is a treasure chest that has been concealed. And I'm going to walk with you into that room, and together we can discover where those resources are. I know that they've been there all along, this treasure chest of resources from the image channel, from the sensation channel, from thought and emotion and connecting to the environment through the senses. And having discovered that, one, there is that resource and it's always coming your way, it's been there all along, then just unpacking that piece by piece. What are the feelings? What are the thoughts that are coming that have a hidden treasure for you. And we'll practice that in image, in sensation, in orientation, meaning, and affect. Each week, we will focus on one of those channels and the gifts of each of those channels so that your biology begins to cooperate among all of isoma channels so that your system begins to work more in sync. So, the end of trauma, it's coming. The positive psychology, the mindfulness, the coaching with me. There will be a Facebook group where you can do Q&A with people who have trained with me. So you can try out new ideas. You can get your own creative unconscious to work for you and to share with others and help others along the way. If you feel like you've had this blessing and curse of potential unrealized, and if you feel like that potential has the aim of support for life on the planet in some aspect, it could be dance, it could be art, it could be meditation, it could be education, teaching, it could be parenting, it could be just being a good partner in your loving relationship. It could be any of those to develop yourself. The End of Trauma course is going to give you a hand. We have the usual. It's a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if it doesn't ring true for you, all good. Get your money back, no question. But we're out with a bigger aim. You can check our Organic Intelligence Facebook group. I'll post our mission statement so you can really see what our aim is. And I'm still cultivating that, but I want you to get a sense of what the difference is between, say, someone who is offering you support, but for a price to be able to, have relationship success or less stress or success in your work, or success in your career. Sure, we'll help you with that. But there's a bigger agenda, because my experience has been when people's systems begin to realign, what shows up is what's most simple, and that's love. That's compassion. It's empathy. It's caring for other people. And because that is so needed right now on our planet, I'm offering this course on the End of Trauma. Because I'd like you to feel like you've got a sense of destiny, that you feel like you get to inhabit more of the reason that you're here. And honestly, as a trauma trainer around the world, I've seen it all. I've worked with concentration camp survivors, Holocaust survivors, torture survivors, ritual abuse survivors, survivors of all kinds of degradation, assault and injury and accident, abuse and neglect. And everybody can get better. Everybody can progress. And mostly, that's what gives us hope. Because where the hopelessness is in that immobility, is in being stuck, is in the sense of not moving. But once the movement begins again, once the ice breaks up and there begins to be a little flow, even if it's slow, even if it's not as fast as I might like, but if it's just moving, I feel better. And feeling better is better. So I hope you'll join us in this End of Trauma course. Check out our website, getoi.org. The trajectory is kindness. Our body wants to share compassion. Our own systems are made for relationship. And we will bring balance and offer tools and insights, practices guaranteed to bring more balance to your own system. So Let this be a commitment to yourself, because this commitment to yourself and being who you are, coming into your nature, is at the same time the selfless availability of the overflow of compassion into the world through an abundance of the opposite of hopelessness. It's hopefulness born of compassion and love. So I think that's about simple enough. I know you know that's the truth. And then let's see how we can work together to share some of this with one another. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this End of Trauma podcast. More is coming. Check out our free resources on YouTube and our Facebook group. And then just consider that we have reason for hopefulness, and it is right here within our reach. I'm Steve Hoskinson, and this is the End of Trauma podcast.